Hi, I'm Justin Lokitz, and this is the Design Shift Podcast, your weekly guide to mastering the leap from creative expert to confident design leader, packed with actionable insights, proven strategies, and real world wisdom. In this episode, I chatted with Marc O'Brien, an award winning creative strategist, designer, and educator dedicated to leveraging design for climate action, about why design's job isn't always to invent, it's to amplify what already works, especially when it comes to sustainability. Keep listening to learn how Marc and thousands of creative professionals are changing the design industry for the good of the planet. And remember to subscribe to the show and the Design Shift newsletter if you enjoyed this episode. Thanks. All right, well, here we have Marc O'Brien, a good friend of mine and an award-winning creative strategist, designer, educator, and a lot of other things. He's dedicated to leveraging design for climate action. So I think this is really special. I know Marc. I've known Marc for a long time. In 2019, he co-founded Climate Designers, which is a global community uniting creatives across industries to address the climate crisis through their work. And also, I know Marc from other work like The Determined, which was an agency that he ran from, I think, like 2016 to 22. Uh, Basically, a design strategy studio focused on sustainability and climate forward projects. And he's also a senior adjunct and faculty member at California College of the Arts, also where I teach in San Francisco. And he developed and teaches a course called Climate Designers, which integrates real-world climate challenges into design education. Marc also co-authored the First Things First 2020 manifesto, which urges designers to prioritize work that contributes to a better world. In fact, Marc, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about some of that work, but also your work with studio heads trying to do the same thing. And beyond all that, he's just a great dude, a trail runner, an outdoor enthusiast, and basically explores everywhere and certainly all the natural landscapes in California. So thanks for being with us, Marc.
Yeah, awesome for that great intro. I need to get that recording.
It's out there. It's yours. All right. So here, this is a big one. Maybe I said all of that.
Mhm.
Tell us, tell me what it is you do today. I think there's a few things you do today because we're both multifaceted and juggle a lot of things. But tell us what will you do today, specifically about climate designers and also your new initiative with studio heads
Yeah.
and why you started these things and really what's your big vision for all of this.
Yeah, I also wear a lot of hats, multi-tool, if you will.
Yeah.
So I work with climate organizations, companies, startups, foundations with all things branding, strategy, experience design. I also work with, and this is a new initiative, I am working with design studio founders, helping them transition their whole studio towards
Mm.
climate-focused work. Happy to dive deeper into that. That's a very new offering. And I can share with you kind of the epiphany for me to kind of
Yeah.
come up with that offering. I also teach part-time, as you mentioned, at CCA. So I'm
Mhm.
bringing what I do professionally inside of design schools because I feel like if design schools are preparing the next generation of design leaders, the topic around climate needs to be part of that, right?
Yeah.
These young students or new designers are stepping into an uncertain future. It's only going to be more common that every job is a climate job, whether a
Mm.
company thinks of themselves as a climate forward company or not. Um, yeah, and then when I'm not doing all of that, I run Climate Designers, which there's a lot to it. It is a global community
Yeah.
of designers. We have, as of the time of this recording, we have about 40 plus volunteers.
Mm.
The big piece of that pie is our chapters and hubs, where we have folks on the ground in their local communities running events and meetups, bringing their local design communities together to have them not only meet one another and share their interests and resources at the intersection of design and climate, but also to learn about what's happening in their communities when it comes to our climate emergency. And then there's also a set of core team folks that I help lead, where they're producing content and other parts of that organization. So I'm kind of the co-captain of the ship, doing it alongside my colleague Natalie Walsh. But yeah, it's a all volunteer organization. It's a
Yeah.
quote unquote side project, but hoping to change that with being fiscally sponsored. Yet another conversation we could dive into.
That's a good one. It's a really good one. Let's just kind of dive into a bit of climate design. You, I want to know, first of all, yeah, I think you graduated way back when, right? Here you are at the apex of your career, still figuring it out, just like all of us. You graduated way back when in UX, and now you kind of do it all. How did you hone your craft to do, its brand design, its UX, its storytelling, and it's also really climate design. How did you hone that craft to find sort of this through line today?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I got out of school. My first degree is in IT web development, which,
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
in a sense, yes, definitely UX. Uh, and so I always knew I wanted to be a part of creating something bigger than myself.
Mm.
I was a maker as a kid. I loved making my own t-shirts, my own stickers. When I found design, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is exactly what I do anyway. I just never knew it was called design, right?
Yeah.
Um, so my first degree was in quote unquote IT web development. Such an early 2000s name for a degree like that.
Sure.
I actually founded a company with my good buddy, and we were called New Global Media. Again,
Oh, that's
early
terrific.
1.0 name, right?
Yeah, right.
And, a lot of Flash sites, a lot of
Huh?
Dreamweaver. Anyway, and then I went ahead and got another degree in graphic design. And early on in that second degree, during that second degree, I knew I wanted to use my skills for quote unquote the greater good. I never really had any interest in just designing something for shits and giggles. I knew I wanted to have a purpose behind my work. And I think where that comes from is listening to punk rock music since I was in seventh grade. That instilled a lot of values in me as a person, and I wanted to bring that into my work, right? It's questioning authority, fighting for causes I believe in, that whole DIY mindset. And I
Right.
just knew that design was a great vehicle to check off all those boxes. And so early in my career, when I was trying to make ends meet, I was independent. So that second degree, I graduated in 2008. Worst time ever to graduate.
Worst time ever. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know
Maybe worse
why.
than now, for sure.
And so when I was trying to just find any work that was still within my kind of value circle,
Hmm.
right? When I wasn't doing that, I was doing a lot of personal projects, and those personal side projects allowed me to flex skills that I wanted to strengthen, while also at the same time produce work that I wanted to do as a professional. So I lean more and more into that social impact design for good work. And because of my side projects, that allowed me to find client work that actually was in that same kind of sphere, right? And then because of that, that allowed me to get paid for certain projects. I was exposed to various groups, and yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there. So I always knew I wanted to have that kind of social impact thread in my work,
Yeah.
going all the way back to punk rock, right? And I just never really let go of that, whether it's being driven or stubborn. I just never wanted to give that up.
Right. I love this idea. And I had this similar conversation earlier today with Kevin Flores. Um, and it was this similar conversation, had these same elements, which is you just started doing lots of different stuff, lots of different designs, sounds like lots of different making. And it sounds like what you did, you grew some roots in some areas. Perhaps you had some domain expertise or you found some, but then it was breadth by taking on all of these projects that you sort of found a through line. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I knew some work I really wanted to lean into, and
Yeah.
others I didn't, and that was fine. You kind of have to get your hands dirty before you can start to see if it's something for you or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just to give you more details of the story of my journey. Back in 2015, I had what I call a climate epiphany, and so
Mm.
it was on a road trip back from Utah back to San Francisco after a week-long workshop with my colleague, and it was just a series of conversations in that like 13-hour car ride that just underscored that working on climate was going to be my thing. It was kind of percolating in the back of my mind based on my previous work. In my social impact work, I have projects that touched upon education, transportation, food, health,
Yeah.
various spaces like that. And so with climate, it wasn't a huge transition, but it was enough of a focus that I at that during that car ride, literally when I got home, I was like, this is what I'm doing. And as you mentioned,
Wow.
I love being in the outdoors. I love, going backpacking, camping, trail running. So it was just always there. It was just that I needed that 13-hour car ride to get that clarity.
Yeah, I love that. I've had a few of those car rides and the idea sparks. Some of those which like it was almost like, oh, I've got to just pull over and start making something. Um, I'd love to go deeper into exactly what climate design is. And I'm going to preface this by saying, you teach this class, for instance, at CCA, and here, we have a bunch of early careers. These are students who are now learning perhaps their new craft, or maybe they're a little bit later and they're getting an MFA for instance, or an MDes degree for instance, and so they have some chops already, and perhaps it's interaction design for instance, right?
Mhm.
And now you're bringing in them climate design. What is it, right? What are they doing then that pairs their current craft, which might be in studies, which might be interaction design, with something that's climate focused? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I always start the conversation uh, every time I start a new class. There's always conversation around just like, why is our climate breaking down? Why are we in a climate
Mm.
emergency? Just like to level set, right?
Yeah, sure.
I don't even talk about design for the first few classes. It's
Mm,
really just to kind of get them caught up on basic climate science, why we're in this mess, what's happening, the impact that we've seen in the past, the impact that we're seeing today, and the impact that we'll see in the near future. So once they're there, then I start to introduce them to where design fits into all this, right?
mm,
And as designers, we have to come to the realization, we have to come to terms with the fact that we have contributed in our climate emergency. We have, as designers, created things, created services, products, experience, etc., that have used precious resources, finite resources from our planet. And the ripple effects of that's a whole conversation, right?
yep.
So we've built industries, we've built disciplines underneath the design umbrella that have produced these things, these again, products, services, experiences where the end person, I try not to use the word customer or consumer, but the person who's using the thing, they are then using it for however long, and then they're
Hmm.
discarding it, right? They're
Right.
throwing it away. So you have a whole line of beginning, middle, and end. This idea of take, make, waste. Um,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
design is in all of that. And so whether you're a fashion designer, product designer, industrial designer, UX, UI designer, whatever, your discipline has played a role in shaping this culture of overproduction, overconsumption. And so really when we get to kind of the big aha moment is the realization of where design fits in a negative way, but then at some point I flip the script. And what I
Mm.
do is I show them that we can still take the skills that we possess as certain types of designers. And if we just kind of modify them, tweak them, if we just learn different frameworks, different material choices,
Yeah.
if we learn better questions to ask, all these things that are already in our DNA as designers, if we just learn better ways of doing things at the simplest kind of level, then we can actually heal and regenerate the damage that we've caused. So it's not so much that they're changing what they're already doing. It's just that they are being exposed to a different way of approaching a design project.
I love that. Maybe you could share an example or two of where you or your students, for that matter, have applied this kind of thinking, and now, you're either seeing the results or you've designed, the first part of those results, something like that.
Yeah, so there's a prompt that I've been using in my climate designers course for the
Mhm.
last couple semesters. It's going to give me a minute to remember it. How might we promote existing climate solutions and approaches to become widespread and adopted? So
Mm,
there's a lot there, right? Let me unpack that. So
yeah.
existing climate solutions and approaches. That means that we don't need a we don't need to wait for a magic bullet solution. We don't need to wait for some sort of like invention, right? We know exactly what we need to do today to
Mm,
draw down carbon, to heal the damage that we've caused, to do all the right things. And then how do we get it adopted? How do we get it to where these solutions become so big and so quote unquote normal that it becomes just default, right? And so what students do is that they form groups based on interest. So you might have some students who are interested in food waste, other
yeah.
students who are interested in transportation, other students who are interested in composting, just to name a few, right? And what I encourage them to do is that they're not coming up with another new solution within that space. What they're
Nice.
doing is what they're doing is coming up with a project to amplify the existing solutions and approaches. So those
Mm,
existing companies that are already in that space, what's the project that they can come up with to amplify that? The analogy metaphor, whatever that I use is a rising tide lifts all ships. So
right.
each harbor is a solution space that the student is work or the student groups are working in. So again, food waste, for example. So what they're meant to do is design the water to lift up all the ships that are already in that harbor, right? And so it's a different kind of design project because they're not coming up with another new solution. They're coming up with something that will lift up every part of that new industry so
Yeah.
that every ship benefits. Because the way that I look at it is that if you have a lot of these new industries emerging within climate, right? And so if there's any one node in that industry that is struggling, it's going to
Mm.
eventually bring down all the other nodes.
Hmm.
So how do we kind of design the grout
Hmm.
to make sure that all the tiles are together, right? I'm using a lot of analogies here, but you get what I'm saying.
I think so. Yeah. Um, yeah, if I rephrase it a little bit, it sounds like what you're doing, this could show up as, I think, as anything from information design. It could show up as community design. It could
Yeah.
show up as, graphic design, right? Whatever it is that part of communication, for instance. And generally, what you're saying there is it's not, okay, we're not building apps to build apps, right? Not building apps to share fun photos or videos. We might build an app, however,
Mhm.
to connect people, collect information, or even an existing platform, design a community within that, something like that. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're still designing the things that design students would typically design.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just that they're not coming up with another new solution that's in competition with what already exists, is that
I see.
they're designing the things that, again, amplify the space that they're in, right? I'll give you
Yeah.
an example. One of my favorite projects is a project called Spore TV. So think of it as Netflix for mushrooms. And
Yeah.
so what I mean by that, this group was really into all things mushrooms. So mushrooms can
Mhm.
be used for many different things: building materials, food, medicine, all the things around mushrooms. So what they did was they created a Netflix-like service called Spore TV,
Yeah.
where you would have all this content centered around mushrooms. So it's not just documentaries, but they were developing quote unquote original content that was a
Uh,
drama or a comedy or an action movie. And it was all still really good content, but behind the scenes, there were, mushroom type of information in those storylines. And so the cool thing about it is that, you know, there's a scene in a show, right, where a little indicator pops up and you can literally pause the scene and shop the scene, and then that takes you to a shopping experience where you're
uh,
actually buying something that is from an existing mushroom company. So it could be a mushroom leather jacket, right?
right.
So it's just they're amplifying these existing companies in this really fun kind of you know outlet or channel, in this case, a streaming service. So that's what I'm saying. It's them creating a thing that any other design project would create, but they're doing
Right.
it so that they're amplifying these existing companies.
That's so cool. Yeah, and I love that you this isn't about necessarily just creating, again, creating new things, right? Flashy new things, but it's either got a message, but really, or whatever it is, but it's the connective tissue between the things is
Yeah.
what you're focused on. Um, how do you approach measuring the impact of
Mm.
these kinds of things?
Yeah, measuring impact, that's always a tough one. I think you would approach it just like any other
Mm,
project, right? You would figure out what is it that you can measure, and then just, write down all of that from the start of the project to the middle
right.
to the end. Um, and then, with that, there are tools and resources and frameworks out there that that are climate focused. So measuring, for
Mm,
example, your carbon footprint. If you're creating a physical product, there's, life cycle analysis. So we're living in an age where there's a lot of smart people, smarter than me, developing these frameworks and tools so that you can actually measure things.
yeah,
But I think the other thing to bring up in the same conversation, and this is something important, as much as we can measure things in the climate space, there's also a lot of things we can't, because impacts everything around
yeah,
us. And
yeah,
a lot of what is in the quote unquote everything in that statement is just is around. It's like the squishy stuff. I call it the squishy stuff. It's the ether. Like we can't really
yeah,
see it or point to it. It's culture, right? It's
right.
stories, it's feelings, it's emotions. So one thing I say a lot is with Project Drawdown, they're an OG climate organization. They literally wrote the book on 100 plus existing solutions and approaches that we need to invest in to draw down carbon. I use them as a foundation in that class. So as much as I appreciate them, I have friends who work there. I applaud their work. Um, the thing that they're missing is culture. Like
Mm,
how do the arts and music and film and how does that stuff also play a role in that? And then how do you measure that? Can you measure
yeah,
that? So, as
yeah,
much as we can push for these technological and natural solutions and approaches to become widespread, there's this stuff, the squishy stuff that also needs to be addressed in parallel with the stuff that we can actually point to and measure.
yeah. It's huge, right? We're talking about systems and systems and systems,
Mhm.
and you do what you can do in there. And yeah, to your point, there's connective tissue that we can, that isn't just ethereal. It's something that we could see. And if
Yeah.
it's grout or something else that we're talking about here, then there is something we can do.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this, you also mentioned your work with studios, agencies, and studio heads. And really, I think it's a weekly thing. I'd love to hear more about that, where you are trying to also help them influence and prioritize their own sustainability practices, how they can bring climate design into their practices. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is that, and how does it work?
Yeah, so as a constant maker, as you know
Yeah,
me, Justin, I'm always, just
always
like you said,
naked.
we're always making something.
Yep.
One of my new endeavors is offering a climate design advising package. And what I'm trying to do with that is help the business side of design studios and agencies transition fully into climate work. So to give you some context, over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been uh, going back to my tribe, right? Before that, I was really the only designer or one of a few designers working directly with climate clients. I kind of
Right.
miss my people, right? I miss my fellow creatives. So over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been wanting to, I've been working with design studios contracting me
Mm.
out for their climate client projects, right?
Hmm.
But I had this realization at the end of last year where it's like, well, wait a minute, I have to wait for a lot of stars to align in order for them to bring me onto a project. Why don't I just kind of go up a level and work with those leaders and founders to transition their whole studio into climate work so that, when we're all said and done, they can bring me on for any project. So it's kind of a
Right, right, right.
selfish
Yeah.
way of doing things. But to unpack that a little bit more, yeah, what I'm doing now as an experiment is I'm producing these weekly calls, inviting design studio founders and leaders, and even those who run in-house design departments to come in every week on Friday. We dive into a particular topic,
Hmm.
everything from, where to get your climate news and information, because many people don't know where to go to get that information. And if you are a studio founder who's wanting to get into that space, you need to know what to pay attention to. Other topics include, how do you build capacity within your team to encourage them to want to get into this space? Maybe they already know certain climate solutions or spaces, and maybe they're not sharing that because it's not what you do currently. There's other topics around business models. There's other topics around promoting the studio. There's other topics around sharing your journey transparently as you transition into the climate space. So, a lot of juicy conversations around that. And the reason why I'm doing these weekly calls is because I want to create a space for folks to not just learn from me, but to learn from others. So, the people who show up to these calls, some are at mile zero in terms of where they are in transitioning fully their studio into climate work. Others are
Yeah.
at mile 5, mile 15, mile 50, whatever. So we can all learn from one another. It's not just me, right? There's no slides. I have a loose agenda, but I keep the conversation pretty open.
Hmm.
And then, full disclosure, it's an opportunity for me to find work in that way, where you might have a founder showing up a few weeks in a row, and they're like, "Hey, this guy Mark knows his shit. Maybe we should hire him to help us transition fully." So then what I would do is I would, which I already have. I have this 3-month package where we cover all the business side of things, where I can work directly shoulder to shoulder with them. And by the end of the 3 months, they have an action plan that they can start to experiment and transition fully, so that, hopefully in the next couple months after that, or maybe even during our 3-month engagement, they're already starting to prototype and test out ways that they can find more client work in the climate space. And the one last thing I'll say about that too is, another reason why I am pursuing this is because when I was reaching out to uh, previous colleagues and new, connections who run studios to just bring me on as a contractor, the conversations that we would have, they all had the same theme. These founders and leaders knew that they wanted to work in climate. They knew it's an important endeavor. They just don't know how. And it's the how, right? That's
Uh,
what I'm trying to figure out. So it's the big, I call it the big how. The big how is what I'm trying to do with my package, what I'm trying to do with these weekly calls. I firmly believe that in the next 10 years, every design studio will be a climate design studio. Every company will be a climate company. And you don't have to, have it in your DNA from the very beginning of you opening your shop on day one. You can kind of start to bring it in now, even if you've been around for 5, 10, 20 years. Um, the one of the reasons why I believe that is because of just the what we're sensing from just everyday people, right? I think people
yeah.
want to, they're not dumb. They understand what's going on in the world. They're afraid, they're nervous about this uncertain future, but they also want to do something about it. And
Hmm.
you're seeing a lot of young folks and a lot of mid-career folks who are waking up and realizing, wow, this is scary stuff. What can I do? How can I help? And so whether it's you, um, having a small team already who have those same feelings, and they want to figure out how to use them in their current situation, studio agency, great.
Hmm.
If you want to attract new talent, especially young talent,
Yeah.
this is going to be a great thing, because young people, all these reports from Deloitte and McKinsey and others, they're saying that a lot of young people are willing to take a pay cut, if they know that the work that they're doing is going to be doing good, quote unquote, good for the planet. They're willing to spend more on companies that have a social and environmental mission. So it's just, read the room, you know? And
Yeah.
so if you are a founder of a studio, or you run an in-house design team, it just makes business sense for you to step more into this.
I think it's fantastic. It's so funny because this connects with the other conversations I've been having, including, as a more of a business designer here, right? That, well, then there's also an opportunity to, sure, if they don't pay well today, let's redesign the business of,
Hmm.
so it pays as well, if not better than, than other things that are degrading perhaps on the, on the earth or other systems at play. So these are just design challenges.
Hmm.
So let's think then about you mentioned there someone that's early career. Perhaps they also are like, oh, Mark, this is the thing. This is the shit. How do I do this?
Yeah.
Or what specific skills or tools or knowledge areas should an early or even mid-career creative designer cultivate to effectively contribute to these kinds of projects, or maybe even get hired by one of these studios as perhaps one of their first hires doing this work.
Yeah, yeah. So a few ways of answering that. I can follow up and send you a link to a Notion page that I created,
Great.
where it's a curated list of links to communities and resources and videos and articles and podcasts, all the things that I've put together over the years to help people who are at mile zero get
Yes.
started, designers who are at mile zero get started in their climate action. So happy to share that with you. Um, Here's the thing. When I started in the climate space about 10 years ago, there were very few online resources, very few online communities, very few videos, podcasts, things like that. It's been amazing to see the growth of this space over just the last 10 years or so. You have Climate Base, you have Terra.do, you have Work on Climate that are helping all professionals transition fully into climate. And then, shameless plug, we have climate designers where we are focusing on the design industry. And so, and I'm sure there's other communities out there for other professions, other disciplines. So it's been really fun to see this space grow. I mean, just recently, I believe it was Apple Music or Apple Podcast, whatever it's called. They just added a climate category to their podcast. They
Oh,
just
that's
did that,
cool.
right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Spotify did that recently too. So like
Mhm.
we're seeing this momentum and drive. So if you are a designer, young and old, wanting to get in the space, you will find that there's plenty of options there. I think maybe to answer your question in this way, Justin, I think maybe one thing that everyone would need to do, especially those who are starting out, would be to figure out how to or where to channel their focus. So
I see. Yeah, yeah.
there's a great exercise called the climate action Venn diagram. It's actually in that Notion page that I mentioned earlier, where there's three circles. It's kind of like the Ikigai diagram,
Hmm. Yeah.
but this one has just three prompts. It's what are you good at? What
Hmm.
skills do you have? Um, what does the world need and what brings you joy? And the point of that is to sit with those three prompts and then figure out what's that center. And that center would be where you would want to focus. There's so much that needs to be addressed. There's so many challenges. I mean, climate affects everything, right? And when you're starting out, you're wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. You want to do the work. You're excited. This is what you want to do next, which is awesome. And that excitement is definitely needed. But when you start to kind of get into the space, you're going to feel overwhelmed very fast. And so I
Okay.
love that climate action Venn diagram because it channels your energy and focus and attention towards something that you have a personal connection with. Because I'll be honest, this shit's hard and it's emotionally hard, mentally hard. I
Mhm.
mean, you're reading articles, listening to podcasts, watching documentaries that just bombard you with facts and
Yeah.
data and personal stories that are not very um, they're not, they're not exciting. They're not fun. I mean,
They're like hammers over the head
oh,
with
yeah,
where yeah, this is the problem. Yeah.
it's hard stuff. But at
Yeah.
the same time, there's so many amazing solutions and approaches that exist today. So many founders,
Mm.
so many studios, so many startups, foundations, all this good work happening. But unless you have that personal connection, you can easily just unplug and say, you know what? I'm done. This isn't for me. If you
Yeah.
have that personal connection, you're more likely to stay with it. Um, if I can share this with you, there's a phrase that I came up with years ago that I've been really trying to push. It's actually the title of my podcast called Doom and Bloom. And the reason why I love that phrase is that it holds two truths at the same time. The doom part acknowledges, yeah, shit's gonna get bad. It's already bad and it's gonna get even worse. But at the same time, there's so many solutions and approaches that exist today that if we all put our energy and channel our focus there, then we can really get ahead of this thing. And so, how can we use the anxiety and anger and this doomness that we're feeling? How do we use that as fuel to fuel what's possible, the beautiful, thriving future that we know exists today? Until we understand where to put our energy, we might get lost in the sea of so much because there is so much out there. So yeah, I highly recommend the climate action Venn diagram. It's a place to channel, and it doesn't have to be forever. You can do it and try it out for 6 months and then revisit it. I revisit
Sure.
it about, every 9 or 12 months. Um, but it's a great tool. There's other frameworks out there like that as well, but it's a place to channel your energy.
I love that. I also, man, you are a huge community builder. You've got, this round table that you're now running weekly. You've got climate designers, which it's got thousands of people in it now, right? You've got 40 volunteers and multiple chapters. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, members come and go, but I think we're approaching the 5,000 mark.
Yeah, five
Ebbs
thousand
ebbs and
community members.
flows, in terms of engagement. But yeah, I mean, I went to design school. I did not go to community building school, so I've been learning this stuff on the job
Huh.
really since my career started, even in
Yeah,
the social impact space. So it's been interesting to be a designer, uh, basically treating community building as a design project, and
right,
going through the classic design thinking framework and all these other frameworks to figure out how to actually build community. Because at the end of the day, these are human beings with hopes and fears and
right,
stress and, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, family, a sick partner, a sick loved one. Like all these things factor into how people show up to a community. Once you have their attention, how do you make sure that they feel welcome? How do you make sure that they feel as if they might want to come back?
right.
How do you nurture those relationships? It's interesting. It's an interesting challenge.
You also, I mean, speaking of community, we had SF Climate Week, I think just last week, and you certainly were a part of that. In fact, we had talked about having this interview, and you're like, "Oh, it's SF Climate Week. I'm really, really busy." What came out of that? What fun, interesting, innovative, hopeful, whether they're trends or tools or communities or talks, something like that. What did you find hopeful that came out of that?
Yeah, yeah. I went to LA Climate Week early April and then
Okay.
came back here and did SF Climate Week. So I'm at the tail end of a crazy April.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that came out, I actually posted about this on LinkedIn today. And again, it's the idea of holding multiple truths multiple truths at the same time,
Hmm.
where climate action is hard. It is hard. We are dealing with entrenched systems. We're dealing with, you know, people that have created l- lifestyles or certain aspects of culture that benefits them and not others. Like this is this is going to take a lot of work. And what I got away from attending both LA and SF Climate Week is the sense of acknowledging that this is hard and
Hmm.
acknowledging that if you need to take a break, others are going to be there to pick up the slack. And then when they need a break, you're back fully charged and you're gonna take up their slack. And we need that kind of communal back and forth of, tag teaming this, right? Um, because climate action is so hard and you might want to give up, at the same time, you can also use that as an opportunity to fuel your desire to keep going,
Yeah.
where it's an opportunity for you to learn new things and meet new people, and at the same time understand that this sucks too, right? Like
Mhm.
it sucks, but it's cool at the same time. Like there's so much coolness happening around climate, like the fact that you have pop star musicians talking about climate action, you have it in movies and music. Like the coolness is there, but let's also acknowledge the fact that it's hard work as well. And
Yeah.
so meeting so many people on the front lines and doing the hard work, let's cheer them on while also acknowledging that they're going to be struggling at times. And then how do we pick up their slack? And because at one point, at some point, we're going to be struggling too, and we're going to need to take a break. So it's this kind of duality of both
Yeah.
hard and motivating and cool at the same time. And how do you juggle that, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway.
I think it's great. It's I mean, this is a community, and I think where you started now, again, we've known each other for quite a long time, and here a decade ago, you started down this path with almost nothing, but as a designer, you did something, and a punker, right? Punk rocker, you did something about it. And now, if you now, I feel like if I look back at Marc O'Brien 10 years ago and now look forward, it's like, oh wow, there's real communities happening here.
Mhm.
And these communities are, from what I'm gathering from you, are working like any good system should, or at least now starting to talk about how any good system works, even a big company system, which is each person only does what they can do. They're not Atlas holding the world on their shoulders. You acquire the skills, right? You use your framework, your Ikigai style framework. You acquire some skills, you figure out the things that you want to do, and you do those, right? And you might broaden those. You might do a few things. You might connect with other people. And certainly, I think that's what you're saying is connect with other people and talk about those. And now you've got two people, and perhaps now skills are working together. They're not the same skills or even the same depth and breadth, right? But here they are, it's like 1 + 1 = 3. That's what I'm gathering.
Yeah.
I think that's true, what you're saying.
No, I think you're right. And yeah, it's the 1 + 1 = 3 idea. We can learn from each other. I think this is even more reason to, in the world of business, is to break down these silos and learn
Yeah,
from each other, whether I'm working directly with a scientist or a policy wonk. Like it just, there's so many lessons being learned in real time that need to be shared across all disciplines, across all industries. I firmly believe that collaboration is the new competition. We need to start
yes,
sharing successes and struggles too. This is hard work. Like, we might have history and best practices to look at, but as we're seeing, they're not a prediction. They're not a predictor of the current state and the future state. They're a data point, but
yeah.
I mean, dude, like we are entering uncharted territories as a species. And so
Mhm,
how can we break down these silos within business, within industries
mhm.
to learn from one another so that that 1 + 1 = 3 actually really does become a thing? Um, I would love to get to a point where there isn't a thing called sustainable design or even climate design in the design industry. I'm going to say this because I always try to say this when I'm talking to folks. The goal of my work, the goal of climate designers is to fundamentally redesign the design industry to put climate at the core of our work so that there is no such thing as a climate designer or a sustainable designer. It is just default,
Wow.
right? And in order for us to get there, we need to all learn from one another within disciplines, within industries, within businesses, and that this just becomes the normal, right? This just becomes what you're taught in school. This isn't
Mhm.
a extracurricular class. This isn't a sustainability club in your work. It's just part of, again, it's part of the ether. It's part of the air that you breathe, as
Right.
opposed to treating it as a nice to have.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Earth is just another persona as part of all the persona that we have to do something for and with. And yeah, it's great, Mark. So, final, how do people connect with you? What do you want them to do once they've read this newsletter or perhaps listened to our talk, our interview?
Yeah, I mean, climate designers, we are in a really interesting stage right now. We are about to apply for fiscal sponsorship so that
Mhm.
we can level up our organization. Once that happens and we get approved, then we can put a lot more focus back on providing external resources, virtual events, things like that. We've been a little quiet lately just because we've been doing a lot of admin behind the scenes work. So if you are reading or watching this as a designer, definitely look up climatedesigners.org. We're going to also start to experiment with offering, office hours or AMAs through the organization. One thing that I've found running climate designers over the last 5 years is that people just want to connect with other people. They want to
Yeah.
learn from, they want to share their successes and struggles. And so we're trying to provide more opportunities to do that. If you are a design studio founder, leader, and you're wanting to transition fully your business, your studio into climate, happy to talk. I have a whole 3 month package ready to go. Um, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of work out there. As I mentioned earlier, in 2025, there are tons of resources, communities, podcasts, books, articles, all the things needed for someone to start to understand how uh, what it is that we're experiencing, why we're experiencing it, and then what they can do to address it. I can only imagine the next 10 years, what types of resources, communities, things like that will be in existence. So this is the right time to get into it. It just makes sense. The one thing I always say as a maybe final thought, Justin, is you can't do business on a dead planet. Every job will be a climate job. So it just makes sense for us to start investing in this. Again, we have all the resources and information and knowledge at our fingertips. There's no excuse to not get into this.
You're here. All right. Thank you so much, my friend. We are overdue for this, and we'll do a lot more of that. And I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin, for the invite. Appreciate
Of
it.
course. Thanks for listening to Design Shift. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review. It really helps more designers like you find the show, and it helps me make better shows. And if you're not already subscribed to our awesome newsletter, head over to designshift.me. See you next time.